episode of Women In. I am so excited. I have the best guests on my podcast, so I can't wait for you to hear from my next guest. But before I do that, in case you're listening to this podcast for the first time, let me tell you what Women In is all about. And so this podcast is all about celebrating women in all walks of life and the people in their lives who are lifting them up. You're going to hear from all kinds of super cool people in my life and share their stories to inspire others to support the extraordinary women around them. This is a space to be disruptive, forward-thinking, and change agents for humankind. It is uncensored, fun, and curiosity-driven. I'm often asked about why I launched this podcast and what I'm passionate about, and this is what I'm passionate about, breaking down barriers for my kids' generation. It's equal parts about my guests and the places we came into each other's lives, whether it be the Kalamazoo Wings, Mindfulness Elevated, or Tony Will Coaching, or they happen to be in my family and friends circle. So Emily Lutz is our guest today. Let me read you her bio. She is fabulous, and then you're going to learn how we came into each other's lives. But Emily is dedicated, unflappable, and innovative. I love the intro to this bio. Regardless of if it is her decade-long career in higher education, volunteer work in local politics, or partnership and media relations experience in the world of sport, Emily's passion for dedication to excellence is evident. Born and raised in America's heartland, hard work, teamwork, and creative problem solving are as much a part of her DNA as it was the pioneers from whom she descended. Emily continues to put herself in the business of finding key partnerships and resources to enhance the organization in which she lives and works. With experience in strategic account management, fundraising, partnership marketing, and event logistics, Emily thrives at thinking outside the box to establish processes and programs that have sustainable, lasting impact. And it is no wonder that we hit it off, because those are the women I surround myself with. So, Emily, that
Absolutely.
is quite the bio.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love power words. So it's like, I love to write that kind of stuff. So I always enjoy when I get to share it with
and
others.
that woman you wrote about is you. Like, when you step back and think about that,
Thank you.
like, what do you think about that? I mean, when you see it on paper, you're like, oh, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. In 2020, as like the world was going through all of COVID and everything, I had been working at my alma mater for 7 years. And so I was kind of grown as far as I could grow. And I started working with a career coach that a friend of mine connected me to, who like she had worked in presidential like administration and things that I was like, why are you paying attention to me? But like, it was great to have someone who didn't know me look at my resume and my skills and get to know me and say like, well, you do all these things, like this is you. So it was great to hear it from an outside person. And then through that process, I started a new career. I got my MBA, and I've just done more to like really lean into and own, like, I'm Emily C. Lutz, MBA. That's who I
love
am.
it.
So,
Well, I have my podcast guest. I interviewed her a while back, but her episode's going to be released next week. And her name is Christy Shin, and she works for the Detroit Pistons. And we're going to get to how Emily and I met. Sports has something to do with it.
yes.
But she has her PhD. And I said to her, Dr. Christy Chin, right? Like, be proud of that.
Yeah.
And that's something we as women,
Yeah.
and she's fully embracing it. Not because I said anything, but, just because that's badass.
Yeah.
Being an MBA is badass.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have an MBA.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
I have my bachelor's, but it's like celebrating our accomplishments and playing big as women. Because a lot of times we like to make ourselves
Yeah.
small.
Right, exactly. And so like when I'm at big events anyways too, I'm an introverted person by nature. And so I have found like when I dress like in bright colors or like good fashion, which isn't my instinct, I have to lean on my sister who is a fashionista to help me. Then it opens so many more doors. People come talk to me. It's like, I'm taking the first step by like putting myself out there, but then it just makes it easier for me to have conversations that, could potentially like be life changing if you really want to talk about it, form connections that you wouldn't have otherwise had. And so I've just like made that as part of like my whole persona, right? Like I'm Emily C. Lutz MBA. I like to wear bright colors. I don't like to shrink to fit in. I did that in my 20s and I'm just not interested in doing it in my 30s
I love
anymore.
that. And last week we were in Vegas together. And
Yes.
I'm finally going to get to how we met here in a minute. But you were wearing this fabulous hot pink jumpsuit. And did I not stop you and
Yeah, thank
say,
you.
love it?
You did
Yeah.
right away. Yeah. And then the next day I had like on a three-piece red satin suit. And Natalie, who works with the hockey league, was like, I always love your suits. And I told her my whole introverted theory. And I just think it's
It's such
great,
a
you know,
pro tip. I
to share.
love
And
that you're sharing this
yeah,
because some people do
yeah,
it naturally. I think I do it naturally where I just throw on whatever feels good. And I've been in this headband and glasses thing
hmm,
lately, and I get stopped a lot for it. And I don't do it on. It's just Tony being Tony. But you're 100%
yeah,
right. It opens doors just
yeah,
to like, hey, I
absolutely.
like that. Oh, I like,
Yeah,
and then you can start these conversations, and we feel good about ourselves, and we bring the best version of ourselves
exactly.
to like the league meetings when we were
Yep.
there in
Right,
Vegas, and I brought COVID
right.
home with me. So if I sound nasally, podcast listeners, it's because I brought the flirt variant of COVID home from Vegas with me, although I wasn't flirting with anything other than
Right.
the ECHL league meetings and my pillow.
Yeah.
So how did
Yeah.
we meet, Emily?
Yeah. So we met through your position with the K Wings, and I work at Bellevue University, which is the ECHL's official higher education partner. And Tony was a guest on one of our speaker series events. So through our partnership, we have experts from the sports industry do like 4 times a year panels, speaker series panels for our students. We have students all over the world. So we get to do it on Zoom, which is why you can be in Michigan and we can be in Nebraska and we can impact students in China, you know, all over. So that's where we first probably were introduced. And then, but I remember in person, I probably met you for the first time in Norfolk at the All-Star game. And I kind of fangirled over you in the tent. I told my friend Jake, I was like, that's Tony. We have to go introduce ourselves. And so I remember like going right up to you, be like, hi, Tony, I'm Emily from Bellevue.
And
So
hopefully I was warm
anyway, that's how we
and
met.
yeah.
You were great. Yes, you
Yeah,
were good.
I
Yeah.
probably was with
Yeah.
Adam Goldberg from Maine. We spent a lot of, yeah,
Probably.
it's funny. His episode just got released today on women in,
I
yeah,
saw that this morning
he's
on
fat. Oh my
LinkedIn. Yeah.
gosh, if you want to listen to an episode about someone who lifts women up, I mean, his marriage, they just had their third kid. Anyways, I won't ruin it for anyone who hasn't listened to it yet, but I love when men love to lift their wives up. Like, I just think that's so cool. So,
Mm,
and
yeah.
I do remember meeting you in Norfolk, and I remember thinking, "Gosh, she's so tall, and she's such great makeup, and I'm so short." And no, I
Thank
just
you.
love, and I love taking these relationships where we met virtually, and we're able
Uh-huh.
to bring them into real life. And I
Yeah.
really enjoy working with Bellevue, not just when we were reduced because you're a league partner, but the what you do for higher education. Our assistant coach this year earned the scholarship, which to be there when we
Hmm.
presented, we surprised him with it, and just the emotion. I still get chills. Like he started crying, I start crying. Like the what you all offer
Yeah.
and how you partner with us in pro hockey. So if you could talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the why behind the higher
Yeah.
education and what you all do for those of us that work in sports.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, Bellevue University, this is really a unique thing I think about us. We're an open access institution. So that means there's not like crazy entrance exams or like huge essays you have to write. And that's in large part because we were formed to serve our community. We're located in Bellevue, Nebraska, right outside of Offutt Air Force Base. So we were serving members of the military as they were transitioning into civilian life or while they were trying to work their way up in the military. And so our average age of our student is 34 years old. We just hope to help people really with the transformative power of education is what we believe at Bellevue, and that everyone deserves a chance. So we have a really generous, credit transfer policy because we believe that all of the experience that you have in your life is all played a point in getting to where you are today. And so the other thing that's great is that we're flexible, right? Because our average age of student is 34, working adults. Some have families, some are managing multiple jobs, some work crazy third shifts. They can't go to the classroom at, say, night school because that's when they're at work. And so I think that's why it works for Bellevue to naturally partner with sports organizations like the ECHL is because sports is not an 8 to 5 type of job at all. It doesn't matter if you're a player, a hockey player on the ice, or you're, the equipment manager, or you're the GM like you and president. There's no 2 days that are the same. And so we try to really be flexible to meet our students where they are and immediately start impacting them in their lives with what they're learning in the classroom. And so that's why we've just been so excited to help. We've done, I think, 15 scholarships now with the ECHL. So it's a variety of players, but also staff members, officials. We have a graduate this year who's completed his master's program, who, officiated the Kelly Cups, which was really exciting. But then also we do a tuition assistance benefit to everyone in the ecosystem, right? So maybe you don't qualify for the scholarship, but you can get tuition assistance to Bellevue, and that extends to your families as well, because families make such a sacrifice for their loved one to be in sports, doing what they love, again, because they're working holidays. I was at a soccer game on the 4th of July, and all those folks were working on the holiday. So we want to be sure to provide those benefits for the support systems of the employees as well, so that they can use, education to transform their lives as well.
It is life changing, especially when you look at the player side of it, because our players typically, well, I shouldn't say typically, it just depends. Some of them forego college
Right.
and go right into playing pro hockey. Some are in college and then are playing and put college on hold. So to be able to give the gift of education, because a lot of times our athletes tend to think, they're young, right? So they're like, oh, this is going to be my life forever. Those of us who have made it out of our 20s know that they don't last forever, and being a pro athlete isn't a forever thing, right? And so education is just critical, and having a partnership with Bellevue. And I love this average age of 34. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah. And over half of our student body is women. And, we have 18,000 students all across the globe. So it's really just our demographics, I guess, are not like what you traditionally consider. We're a not-for-profit private university located in Bellevue, Nebraska. And so people, I think one thing about us, but because of our online reach that we've been doing since the 90s, I give my coworkers a hard time that since I was in kindergarten, Bellevue's been online. And they're like, I don't want to tell you how old I was in 96. So it allows us to really like serve the population of the world, which is, it's not just like these 18 to 22-year-olds anymore that deserve college, right? Everyone deserves an education. And so it's trying to give that access to everyone.
Absolutely. And I love that half. I mean, the Woman In is the name of this podcast, are women, right?
Right.
That is, and
absolutely.
Do you know what the average is for other universities? Just how you will compare?
Yeah, I don't. I know my alma mater was a very small 500 person school, but it was also in Nebraska. And we were like probably 48, 52 male to female. Part of that was because of, the size of our sports teams. Like they were equal to meet Title IX, right? Number of teams, but like a football team is going to have way more people than, a volleyball team. So I don't know, but I do know that it's like something that our president is a woman, Dr. Mary Hawkins, is something she's very proud of, to say like how diverse our student body is, and representing the population that we serve.
I need to have Dr. Mary on.
I'm sure she would love to be on the podcast. So we can talk about it offline.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to
connect.
connect.
Love to have her on.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic. So are you born and raised in Nebraska?
I moved to Nebraska when I was 8. So I have a younger sister who is profound hearing loss. I'm trying to quit calling her my baby sister because she's not a baby. She's 26, who has profound hearing loss. And so when I was 8, we moved to Nebraska for the services at Boys Town National Research Hospital to provide to her. But then also my dad was a pediatric specialist in genetics, endocrinology, and metabolism. And the med center in Omaha has a huge they're innovators, I guess you would say, in Children's Hospital as well in Omaha in helping kids with rare medical issues. And so we moved here kind of in combination for those two things. But I'm a proud Nebraskan, but not a Husker. Okay. I like to say, not a Husker fan.
The only sports the only sport I'm into is hockey, and K-Wing hockey specifically.
Yeah.
So
you're right. Yeah. Okay. Well, for any other sports fans that are listening, I'm a proud Nebraskan, but I'm not a Husker, so don't put that on me.
I should claim, I need to claim my Ohio State Buckeye relation to my husband because
There you go. That's important. Yes. Yeah. So then, So if any of those Buckeyes are listening, I'm not a Husker. So.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Your sister. Now, tell me a little bit more about her hearing loss. I'm passionate about this. I wear a hearing aid, and we did a deaf awareness night.
And I loved, yes, yeah, I loved that. Yeah. So, my sister is 26 years old and a total badass. She is a welder, by trade, but she, like I mentioned, is a fashionista, and she currently is employed selling luxury wools and furs and
Wow.
leathers, in Omaha. So I just remember I was 6 years old when she was born, and both my parents are medical. My dad is a doctor, like I mentioned. My mom's a respiratory therapist. They both worked in NICUs and PICUs, so they had a lot of experience with kids as well as I have a brother who's younger than me, so they were third-time parents by the time she was born. And about 6 months old, they thought something wasn't right. And so they worked with the folks at Wesley Medical Center in Wichita, Kansas, and they worked to get her diagnosed by 6 months with profound to severe hearing loss, which in 1998 was ahead of the game. Newborn screening testing wasn't around. And so it was really a huge deal that she was diagnosed so early and then aided by the time she was 9 months old. And because of where technology was at the time in the late 90s, they told my parents to pick what type of sign language we wanted to learn because she would probably never speak based off of how severe her hearing loss was. And so she worked with great speech therapists, audiology. Like Ellie's had a great team, and I'm sure she would say the same thing to support her entire life, to the point where she eventually, when we moved to Nebraska, she was aided with hearing aids that, computerized pitches she couldn't hear and brought them down to where she could. And so for like context of the severity, a lawnmower next to her ear unaided is a faint whisper. So like one of the things that my mom knew something wasn't right was she slept through a flyover on the 4th of July. And then we have huge family reunions and she slept through the whole thing. And so my mom was like, this isn't normal. Um, and so with amazing interpreters and like I said, OT, PT, speech therapy, she eventually was mainstreamed, with an interpreter we went to a Christian K through 8, um, middle school and elementary school where she played sports. She was in band. And then she went to high school, mainstream high school with an interpreter where she was in band. She plays the saxophone in concert bands, but then did, frontline, like the vibes, the like
Yeah.
xylophone type things. Because marching, she also has vestibular dysfunction. So balance is tricky for her. So marching realistically wasn't going to be great for her. So she taught herself a new instrument with the help of, again, amazing professionals who gave lessons. But yeah, then she took an aptitude test and they told her she would probably be good at something with her hands. And so she like, saw all the traditional like male trades and then like some female things. She's like, well, maybe I'll try welding. And people would be like, oh, like artistic welding. And she's like, no, I'll do real welding. And so she got a full ride scholarship to our community college in Omaha to do welding. And then she practiced that, I guess you would say, for several years through the pandemic, and then was working in manufacturing, and then just got to know the folks at the company that she works at now. And it was closer to where she lived. And like welding is such a hot job, like physically taxing. And so she's always got overheated. And then also like people are terrible. She's a pretty girl, and she is tough as nails. So, I couldn't put up with that like she did. She took it all in stride. But she, gets to deal with different problems working in
Yeah.
retail. So, you just trade different things. So yeah, so that's my sister's story. And so our whole family, we learned sign language, when we moved to Nebraska. Like some families like have church on Wednesday nights and then like piano lessons on these days. We were at sign language class twice a week. And now mainly her and I just use it to talk about people when we're in a big space. But like, my brother got married last summer and him and his wife made a very concerted effort to find an interpreter, because it was a full mass so that she knew, everything that was going on. And so she just, she's amazing.
So when we talk
yeah.
about women and one of the questions I ask, because I've been off script since the beginning of this, so I send questions to my podcast guests, and I'm like, basically, I'll start with first
Yeah.
one, and then who knows if we'll get to the other one. But
Yeah. Yeah.
when we look at the women that you're surrounded by that really
Uh-huh.
impact you and influence you, it sounds like your sister's one of them,
Yeah.
your mom.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My grandmas, both of them, were nurses. My aunts, my cousins. I have like I have an amazing family, and sometimes they drive me
That's
nuts,
family.
but they're also amazing. Right, exactly. But then also, I think like I am always going different places and doing different things, and people are like, "Oh, you're never home," and it's like, well, when my friends have like something going on, I want to go support them, right? So like this week, I'm visiting one of my friends in Colorado, but next week I'll go with Las Vegas with her to help her with a work event, or last week, my friend, her son just had his tonsils out and they took a sick day to go to the zoo. So I was like, great, I'll take a sick day and I'll go to the zoo with you guys. So I just am so lucky to have a great circle of people around me, that like they give to me. And so I want to give back
Oh,
to
I
them.
love it.
And I think that's why I am able to be Emily C. Lutz MBA, is because, I get fed just as much as I
Yeah.
give.
That's beautiful. And so how
So
would you finish the
yeah,
statement, woman in dot 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 for you?
yeah. I thought about it a lot, and I would say, like, technically, by career profession, I'm a woman in
Mhm.
higher education, right? Because of my work with like partnerships, but then also I'm an adjunct professor in the sports management program. But I don't know that I necessarily like identify with that because I never set out to be an academic or work in higher ed. It just kind of happened. And so I think I'm just like really a woman in 2024 in Omaha, Nebraska, like with diverse interests. Like that's just, who I am. And
I get the
yeah.
best answers to that question because when I wrote the
Yeah.
when I wrote this, like the podcast became a thing because I
Hmm.
well, a lot of reasons, but being a minority in a
Hmm.
male dominated field,
Hmm.
my kids,
Yeah.
like just thinking about like I have two daughters and then a son in between, and
Uh-huh.
I'm just like I don't know, I want to like I said in the intro, I want to remove barriers, right? And I want
Yeah, absolutely.
women to be on an equal playing field. And I still see it over the place where it's not like that.
Yeah.
And I experience that on a daily basis. But the cool thing is when I ask women in, like I go, I'm a woman in sports, I'm a woman in entrepreneurship because I own a couple coaching businesses and but
Uh-huh.
I've got these women coming on here just like you. And I have men on the podcast too, right? But talking about
Uh-huh.
like I'm a woman in 2024 from the Midwest. Like
Yeah.
that's who I am right now. I love that. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
like creative,
Yeah.
but like authentic because it keeps the
Yeah.
doors open. Like you said, I'm gonna go and do. How beautiful is that?
Yeah.
That's your life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that I like have the freedom that I can. And, like I just recently purchased a house, very unplanned. I like didn't have it. I make a vision board every New Year's Eve. That's what I do. It was nowhere like anywhere near it, but I purchased the condo I had been renting, and I like really got to be thinking about like my grandmothers, and like my mom has never owned a house on her own, like my grandmas had to quit their jobs when they had their kids and hope that they would get hired back because maternity leave wasn't a thing. Like my great grandma, who I have fond memories of, when she was born, she didn't have the right to vote. Like, I just think of these things that like very real people in my life put into perspective. Like, it's easy to get down, right? Like, I didn't handle the house thing with grace at first. Like, my skin broke out. My mouth got canker sores. I was so stressed. But now that it's done and I own it and I have the mortgage to prove that it's mine, like, how great that I can do that because I'm a woman in 2024, not a woman in the pioneer
Oh,
days, you know?
100%. So let's go back. Not that you probably want to focus on this, but
Yeah,
I want to, if you don't mind
we
being
can.
vulnerable for me, what was
Yeah,
stressful about it for you where you're having a physical
yeah,
reaction? Talk to me about that.
yeah. It was very much like on a Friday, I had my quarterly review, and then my landlord texted me during it, who is a very nice lady and lives in Texas. She's in her 80s. Um, and so she's rented this condo to me. And so she just is like, hey, please call me when you have time. And she tells me, like, I'm selling your condo. You can either buy it or you have to find a place to move. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much is easy about living here, right? Because my father has a rare form of Alzheimer's and he lives within 1 mile of me, so I can grab him and take him to doctor's appointments. Like, it's really easy for me to hop on the interstate and get to the office when I have to work. Sometimes I work from home, sometimes I go to the office. When I moved in, my couch had to be like lifted in on the balcony, because the stairwells were too narrow. So like my brother doesn't live here anymore to do that for me. So like when I just started thinking through all of the things, and I'm a planner, right? Like I'm the oldest daughter of an oldest daughter. And so like I have a plan, I do things this way. And so it just really threw me for a loop because it wasn't even on the horizon of possibilities. And then I think it's coupled with my grandma had just passed away about a month before. And so any really big monumental thing in my life that's happened, that's been unplanned, like because the best things usually are. I had her that she could be my sounding board and like talk through things with. And so it was just really also a big, heavy reminder that I didn't have
Mhm.
her to be like, oh, you can do this, Emily. Like, oh, just like the things that grandmas can do that even if my mom or my sister or my friends were saying the same thing, even if my financial planner was saying the same thing, like not having my grandma there to say that too was just
Mhm.
tricky.
You bring up
Yeah.
you and I have something else in common that I did not know, and that's why again I love doing this podcast. So your dad has Alzheimer's,
Yeah.
and so does my mom.
Mhm.
And so my mom's
Mhm.
late stage, and my dad's her caretaker. And it sounds like your dad living on his own? And what?
Um, Yeah, so let me tell you. So my dad, first of all, like I mentioned, is a pediatric specialist. So literally a genius, the smartest person anyone's ever met. Internationally published in medical journals. This fall, he's being honored by Children's Hospital as an innovator in pediatric treatment. And so we just kind of started noticing that his vision was deteriorating. Um, it's great because he's had the same group of friends since Catholic kindergarten. And so they were all like, oh, Rich, it's just aging. Like you got to go get your cataract removed just like we did. And so, he started going to the eye doctor and like these different things. At the time, I wasn't living in Omaha. I was living about an hour and a half away. And my brother was like, dude, dad cannot see at all. Like, we got to do something about this. And I was like, okay. So he, at the med center, since it's, a great medical resource, he happened to circumstantially, there was a guy who knew about this rare type of Alzheimer's who was here, and it's called PCA. And I'm not a medical person, so I'm not going to tell you what it stands for besides the last letter is atrophy. But essentially, it's the same type of like plaque buildup that causes
Mhm.
Alzheimer's, but it's in the back of his brain. And so his eyes are fine, but his brain cannot compute what
Mm.
he's seeing. And so we're really lucky in that, like, first of all, he's super smart to start with. So he's still insanely like on top of everything. But the short term memory is the problem, and really vision. Like he doesn't drive anymore. It's really hard for uneven surfaces. So we live in Midtown. So like sidewalks aren't super level because they're just old, 100 years old. But he lives in a house that my brother owns. And recently my sister and her boyfriend and their husky Riley moved in. And so together he's still there because he could still see when he lives there. So it's safe for him to be there. He knows where stuff is. But also if my sister and her boyfriend and Riley didn't all live there, I think it would be very tricky, for him to still be on his own in the
Yeah,
house.
what a great. So this is the
So,
first time I'm hearing of that form of Alzheimer's,
mhm,
and
mhm.
because normally
Yeah,
you hear about at least what my mom has, which is the traditional. I
yeah,
mean, traditional as you can
yeah,
get, in terms of just
mhm,
the memory loss, and
yeah,
she's still.
right. And he'll get there eventually, but we're grateful that like right now, because now like we can do stuff with him, right? Because he's still high functioning. It sounds terrible to say, but yeah, you are acutely aware of what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
So,
it's very, it's one thing. I was just telling my husband about it yesterday because we were talking about it, but it's one because we lost my mom a long time ago. It's essentially what's happened.
mhm,
And now it's, we're to the stage where she's sleeping 18, 19 hours a day, and I live a half hour from them, and my dad's 81, but my mom is 75. And so, and he's in excellent shape, but it is, my mom isn't my mom anymore. So it's this bizarre
mhm.
grieving process.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and you don't know when it's going to end, right? But it's not like they're
You're
there.
right.
And I don't want to sound callous, but I mean, it is like when people say it's the worst, they're not kidding. Like this shit
Yeah,
sucks.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's terrible. And like to know the inevitable. Like I think that's what's really hard for my dad too, is because he knows so much and he's so used to like finding innovative treatments, for people. That then it's just really tough to know what his ultimate
Yeah.
end will be, I
So
think, for him.
how do you
But
so one of
yeah.
the things that I've learned about myself over the years, and I talk very openly about this,
Mhm.
like I quit drinking almost 4 years ago, and
Mhm.
like because that would have been a coping mechanism for me for sure when I was,
Mhm.
my mom was
Mhm.
diagnosed. Well, we knew well before she would ever get diagnosed because she fought us on it for years, and My mom and I used to get in giant
Uh-huh.
fights about it, but she finally got diagnosed
Yeah.
about 3 years ago. Finally, I mean, it took like 9 years to get her diagnosed. It was highly
Yeah.
frustrating, but
Yeah.
very not unusual, because it's scary.
Right.
But how do you cope with like the loss of your grandma or
Yeah.
watching your
Yeah.
dad go through this? What are
Uh-huh.
some of your coping tools?
Well, I worked with a grief counselor after my grandma passed away. Thankfully, our company provides like amazing employee therapy services, especially when you've had any type of life event. And so I thought I was just stressed. Like, my grandma passed away. Again, I'm the oldest daughter of the oldest daughter. So there's like things that the business of after death and supporting my mom from far away, stuff with my dad. Like I was teaching and working full time. And so I thought I was just stressed. And so the grief counselor pointed out that it could also be grief. And so when that perspective helps me give myself more grace, I tend to give others a lot of grace, but I don't give it to myself. And then she also suggested, because my whole life I've been like, you go to college and then you get a job and then you work up in your job and then, oh, got a new job and then I went to grad school, but like, what am I doing now? And so she suggested I set a new goal and then just like take time to prioritize, like, okay, dad, I know we need to go to the grocery store, but I'll be there in an hour because I'm going to go like on a walk or read a book or do something fun for me. And so this is my first time publicly saying this, which means my mom doesn't know this yet, so I'll have to tell her before you post it. But I'm going to run a half marathon, which, yes, very exciting. I've mentioned this to you because I know you've done them as well. I am not a runner at all. The longest I've ever run on purpose was 1 mile in gym class. Besides like basketball, I played basketball. You mentioned my height, so running ladders for conditioning. But two of my friends are sisters, and we used to work together. And like my ultimate dream would just be to work life with them again, do life and work with them. But they both have gotten on these like very healthy lifestyle, and they want to run a half marathon. And so whatever I could, I said yes to support them before I thought about like I'm gonna have to run. And so I'm doing that. It's not easy at all. It's actually like hard. But the other day, Wednesday, whatever, however many days ago that was, I was on this run, and it was the hardest one for sure. That I just was like, I'm not doing as good. I'm not that fast. I had to walk, and I was like, should I just scrap this and do it again tomorrow? And then I like also had the realization, like, just because something is hard and you don't accomplish it as easily as you think you should doesn't mean it's not worth it, which I know is a great life lesson, right? So it's teaching me life lessons too. So I've been enjoying that process, I guess. So I do that,
You
and
said
then
like,
like,
do you remember when we
I
talked about
guess,
in Vegas? What did I tell you about the
yeah,
80?
you just said that you predicted it. You said walk when
Yes.
you need to. And so that was too what I was like, okay, well, Tony said walk when you need to. But then really, truly, I've mentioned to my friends a lot, but that's who helps me get through things. And I have different friends for like different elements of my life, right? So like when I need career advice, there's people I go to. When I need like life advice or siblings advice or parents or whatever, like I just have different people that help me and put things in perspective, which is what made the buying the house thing tricky too, right? Because everyone wanted to give Emily good advice, but like Emily didn't know what she wanted because this wasn't even on the radar. And so I was able to find some of my friends that have a friend who's a mortgage lender who like just gave me business advice, right? So I really believe in the like having a group of people around you for different things, and that like you don't know what you don't know. My grandpa used to always say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I found that to be incredibly true, with like work, but also with life.
Absolutely. And let me
So,
point out, I know you mentioned your sister was a badass, but you are a
hmm
badass too because you bought that
yeah, thank
condo
you.
on your own.
Yeah,
And I want to say
yeah,
that
yeah,
own again because I talk about this all the time. And and I'm not trying like I'm of a different generation. I'm a skosh older than you. In '96, I was graduating from high school. That was my so I'm just we know I'm
yeah.
older than you, but I am, so I've been divorced twice. I'm in my third time's a charm marriage, and Josh was fabulous, and he's stuck with me whether he likes it or not from here on out. But having that financial independence to be able to say,
hmm
this is what Emily wants, this is what Emily's doing, this, and like, and ask
hmm
for help, right? Like my first leadership pillars, go
Yeah,
to the experts. You're going to experts. But that's
Yeah.
because you are doing it. You don't need anybody else to buy that condo.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
badass. And I want my
Yeah.
daughters and my
Thank you.
son to do the exact same thing. And not that life partnership can't be a thing, it certainly can be a thing.
Right.
But
Yep.
because you want it, not because I have to be married to, or sharing my life with someone to
Absolutely.
buy something. No. So I just want
Yep.
to celebrate
Yeah.
you because that's fucking
Thank you.
badass. So there you go.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
I
it.
mean, it's so
Appreciate
cool.
it.
It's so,
Yeah.
there are a lot of women in my generation that
Yeah.
didn't do it that way. And I have a lot of empathy for them. And we can start over at any age, by the way. It doesn't matter how old.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
Absolutely.
It's hard
Yeah.
to do. And
Yeah.
so I love seeing like your generation like grabbing it by the balls and doing it.
Yeah. Just going for it. Yeah. That's why I'm like, someone asked me one time, like, why do you like do the things I do? I'm like, well, it's just like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I can probably figure it out. Like,
That's how I live my
you
life.
know,
I have no clue how to run a hockey team.
yeah.
I'll figure it.
Right.
10 years later, here
Exactly.
I am.
Exactly.
Right?
Right. Winning
Yeah,
awards.
winning some, not the ECHL
Yeah.
Exec of the Year
Yeah.
award. I've been nominated 7 times. I've never won it. That's okay. There's
There's always
always, I
next
won't
year.
give up. Listen, I am
Right.
resilient if nothing else.
There you go.
So you
Exactly.
mentioned reading. What are you reading right now or listening to?
Yeah. Yeah. So I actually have been, so it's the summer and I desperately needed the summer off
Mhm.
from teaching. I have found that teaching is almost just as hard, if not harder, it depends on the day, than going to school. And so I've been enjoying some fun summer reading. So years ago, on a whim, I loved to go to the Target book aisle in high school. I worked at a retirement home, and my only bills for my paycheck were gas and car insurance. So I spent all my money at Barnes and Nobles. Well, so that doesn't exist anymore. So I go to Target, and I bought a long time ago Carrie Soto is Back, which is a Taylor Jenkins Reid book. And just the back, I don't judge a book by a cover, but I loved the cover and then I liked the back. And so my longest friendship is my friend Rachel. We've been friends since fourth grade. And she lives in Kenya with her husband and 3 kids. And so it's amazing with technology. Like, our whole lives we've been sharing book recommendations and we can still do that. And so she texted me this spring and was like, I just finished this Carrie Soto book. The whole time I was thinking, you need to read this. Like, Emily would love this book because it's about sports. And she's like, but first you need to read this Malibu Rising because some of the characters overlap. And so I finally got around to doing it. And I seriously owned this book for years before I finally finished reading it. And I started it when we left Vegas, when I was waiting to board the plane. And by the time we touched down in Omaha, I had finished. And the extra special thing was that my sixth grade teacher was on that flight unexpectedly. And Rachel and I were in the same sixth grade class. And so I was like, Miss Lundgren, which is not her name. She's a PhD and married now. But I was like, oh my gosh, Rachel told me to read this book. And so then we took a picture with the book and me and her and texted it to her in Kenya so she would have it when she woke up. So I've been doing some fun summer reading. But then I also have on the docket a textbook to read about sports ethics. And then Michelle Obama's second book. I read her Becoming book and really liked it prior to the 2016 election. And so I bought her follow-up book, and again, it's just been sitting on my bedside table, so I brought that
I
with
want to
me to
read
read
her
as
book.
well.
I haven't read either one of them. I'm going to
Hmm. I really liked
Becoming.
Becoming.
I'm
Yeah.
writing that down. I have that written
Hmm.
next to the TV show I'm going to start watching, The Bear, because everyone's talking about it.
Oh, yes, everyone says that's amazing, but I like sometimes get secondhand stress
Mhm.
by things. So like I can't watch The Office because I know that's controversial, but like Michael Scott is such like an HR total nightmare for me that I would be like, I can't, it's making me anxious. Like I was a Title IX coordinator for 3 years, so like I just was like, I cannot
Oh,
do
you
this.
crack
So
me up. My husband,
um
okay, two things on
yeah,
The Office. My husband's favorite
yeah,
TV show
yeah,
ever is The Office. And he has
yeah.
watched it probably 10 times through. I've only watched it one time through. It was before
Uh-huh.
we were together. Now, I get compared to Michael
Uh-huh.
Scott all the time for my I
Do
do.
you really?
So I am, in HR, if you're listening, I know, but I do because I'm just quirky. I mean, obviously,
Yeah, you think like out of the box and you do your own
and I
thing.
don't
Yeah,
mean
yeah,
to be
okay, okay.
offensive at all, but it's funny. I
You have a
do,
good
just like
heart.
he does. So I
Yeah.
totally get what you're saying
Right.
about that secondary stress. There was another show that was just on Netflix
Yeah.
recently. What was it? The one where the woman stalked the guy and it was from the UK. I watched it.
Oh my gosh, Baby
Did you,
Reindeer or whatever. See, I didn't watch that because I was like, oh, this will
it was
creep me out.
actually, oh, so good. Um, but I
Okay.
fight through that stuff. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna. Now you do what you need to do, but I'm like, someone if I start,
Yeah.
yeah, like
It's
there's
okay.
certain things I will not watch,
Yeah.
like especially if there's too much violence. I don't like that. So
Yeah. See, I love a good cult documentary or like taking
yeah,
down the mob. I don't
I
know why, but
love a good
I
cult.
love those. I think it's because I love
Yeah,
history.
I
So,
love true crime. Oh
an
my God.
understanding.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
forget about it. Get me a
Yeah.
Dateline episode and a cup of coffee. My husband's like, Tony is in her bubble. I'm
Yeah.
like, you're damn right. I'm gonna be, no one's gonna murder
Yeah.
me.
Right. Exactly. Not on my watch. I'm paying attention. Yeah, I know. No, and then listening to, I have to plug two of my friends have done podcasts. My friend Taylor Stern did a couple of seasons of Thriving in the Wild, or just Thriving. She's everywhere with that. We've been friends for, since we were like 18, 19 years old. We were minors together in Las Vegas. You can't do anything in that town. So we hung out with each other and ate a lot of candy and we were volunteers, so annoyed the staff that we were volunteering with. So she was previously with the Dallas Cowboys and then did her own thing with her podcast. She's taken a break. Her dad got unexpectedly ill and passed away. But it's really a good podcast series. So I loved that. And then my friend Bridget Howard, previously with the Mountain West, did several different podcasts that you can find under the Mountain West,
Check them out.
that are making her mark. Yeah, in celebration of Title IX, and just different things. So I love both of those.
Awesome. Yeah. Sounds like you are surrounded by
Yeah,
so many amazing women. How do you support other
yeah,
women? I mean, you just did it right there. How?
yeah, yeah. I think it's intentional, right? And then sometimes it's not. So just I don't know. It seems very innate in who I am, I guess, which I have to give credit to my mom and my aunts and my grandmas, and the way that they raised me. My grandpa was a career army guy, so my grandma was oftentimes someplace else in the world or, in a tiny town because my grandpa was in Vietnam with four little kids. So it's just what you do. You show up for people. And so regardless of gender, that's what I do for people. But I'm just really lucky that I have a lot of amazing women in my life who do it for me. And so then I'm
Mhm.
honored to do it in return
So
for
one of
them.
my favorite questions, and is this one I'm about ready to ask you, and you probably had to give it some thought because most people do, is like, what have you changed your mind about recently? The reason I ask this question is
Yeah.
because sometimes we get stuck in this mindset. And I think it's usually the older generation, as we talk about different generations, that like, nope, this is just how it is.
Hmm.
And no, that's not how it is. We're allowed to change our minds at any time about anything. And sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. I talked about, and
Yeah.
I mean, many episodes that I changed my mind about drinking alcohol, but I've changed my mind about a lot of things. So, what have you changed your mind
Yeah.
about recently?
I think, I've talked a lot about it with my house and like running and all these things, but I think I've like changed my mind that a large portion of my 20s, I had a lot of responsibility at work. I worked at my alma mater, which was a really small school. We're scrappy. So I was the director of student activities and I was the Title IX coordinator and I was the alumni relations officer and did a lot of fundraising. And I used to always joke to our college president, like, I need a real adult. I'm not a real adult in this situation, even though I had responsibility. And like it was kind of a running joke, but like once my grandma passed away and then like buying the house and everything, like I think I've fully stepped into and embraced like at 32, I'm a real adult and I can do like grown up things that I can just make the decision and
Mhm.
it's done. Like I have the power and authority to make decisions and like not feel bad about
Yeah.
it.
And that's the beauty
So
of your 30s. So, I had my son on the podcast last week, and he's just 20. Well, not just 20. He'll be 21 in January. And I'm having every generation on this podcast, every age group. So
yeah,
actually, let
absolutely.
me think about all my guests. Well, you're probably not the first one in the 30s, but I've only had maybe two or three. So I asked Landon, I
Yeah.
said, what's important to your generation or 20 something? So I'm going to ask you, what's important to 30 somethings right
Yeah.
now?
I think for me, and like obviously I recognize this is unique to my perspective, like I said, as a Midwestern woman in 2024. But I think like just having boundaries
Mhm.
that make sense, but then also not like limitations.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because boundaries are not limitations. It's actually respecting yourself and others around you. And so when people like put limitations on you and like say it's a boundary, you're like, oh, you need to stay in this role. Like that's infuriating to me. And my friends that I like talk to, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me at work, or this is happening in my life. And oh my gosh, same type of thing, but different, because I live somewhere else. And so I think that, I also think like just being respected, right? Like if I don't ever have to hear, well, you could buy a house if you didn't have so much avocado toast in Starbucks. Like, let's also recognize that millennials have been through how many like big pivotal world events and economic up and downs and like these things that are valid even if we're young when they happen. I think that's too. And I have a lot of respect for Gen Zers. They frustrate me. My sister's a Gen Zer, and so her approach to things is different than me. But like they too, like they are tolerant, and that is amazing. Like they are so loving and tolerant and inclusive, but then also like they don't have tolerance for stupid stuff anymore. And so I think that's
I
inspiring
know.
too.
I love Gen Z. I love all the generations. I
Hmm.
think I mean the greatest
Yeah,
generation is my
right.
dad. I
Oh
just
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
so cool.
yeah,
I love to learn from all the generations. And right now I'm smack in the
yeah,
middle at 46 years old. As a
right.
Gen X, I
Yeah,
am like right in the middle of all
yeah,
of it. And it's like, it's kind of cool to,
yeah,
to watch the view of all the different generations. That's why I like to ask that question,
right.
which is not on the questions list. So good job for answering that without,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's my PR training.
you're like, you never know what to.
Yeah.
So where
No.
can people find you if they
Yeah.
want to connect with you, Emily?
Yeah. So my social handle is the same it's been since I was a sophomore in high school and secretly got social media. Emily Lutz 2010. So Lutz is Lutz and then 2010. Um, I'm on all social platforms, and LinkedIn is also that. And then my website is emilylutz.net. And that has my full bio, and my resume. But then I also sometimes just need to like write things out. And so I will often host that on there as well. I also have this, I've never worn it to any ECHL stuff, but I have a boiler suit that I'm obsessed with Formula One through my dad. And I was a guest of the team Aston Martin at the Austin Grand Prix in 2022. And so I had this boiler suit my friend printed for me. That on the back, it's a custom maze. My friend Eric has the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous hand drawn maze. And so he's like always making maze art. And so in the back is my dad's Corvette that he drove all through medical school in a maze that my friend, local business, owns a print shop. So she printed that. But then also on the pockets are my signature and then a QR code that goes to my website. So that's just like a special page. And then I went to the Vegas Grand Prix last year and I wore it, and like I have UTMs on it so I can see like who scanned it, when and where, and it's like a really fun thing for me to wear. So all of that to say that QR code also goes to
I'll
emilylutz.net/boiler
have to
suit.
check that out.
So
That is so cool. Good for you. You
yeah,
are a badass.
yeah.
I am so glad I got to have you on
Thank
the
you.
podcast and get to know you even better
Thank
and
you. Thanks for having me.
more personally than
Yeah.
professionally. Because when we see each other at events, I always feel
Yeah.
terrible because I'm getting pulled in so many different directions. It's like, hi. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
being,
Yeah. I know. I know how it goes.
so
Yeah.
it's just such an
Yeah.
honor to have you on and share all the different
Thank you.
facets of your life and the woman that you are. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was so
Awesome. All right.
fun.
Well, everyone, if you are
Yeah.
looking to connect with Tony, me, the host of this podcast, you can find me at mindfulnesselevated.com. That's where my lifestyle coaching business is. Or on the professional development side at TonyWillCoaching.com. And if you're wondering what the heck she does in her day job, that's KalamazooWings.com or KWings.com. You can find me there. And I'm happy to connect. So until next time.